the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Hey there again, you rotten rascals. It's Maud Garrett. Oh, the 1980s. A time when everyone was making big moves in suits with big shoulder pads and big hair, listening to big country. Tom Hanks starred in the movie Big. Things were just bigger then, is what I'm saying, and also more neon coloured. And if you can't get enough of the era of headbands, leg warmers, and old ladies asking for the location of the beef, Rotten Tomatoes has you covered. We've again pulled some of the top selections from our essential films of the 1980s list, just for your nostalgia viewing pleasure. You're welcome.
Einstein. Hey, Einstein, where's the dot, boy?
Back to the Future. Is there anyone who doesn't love Back to the Future? With a 96% tomato meter score and a 94% audience score, I'm gonna go ahead and say, with some confidence, that really is the power of love. 80s dance moves. Sometimes the classics are classics for a reason, and the Robert Zemeckis timeless time travel comedy checks all the boxes. It's funny, it's got a wildly original creative premise, and it has Huey Lewis songs. That's it. That's literally all you need.
Welcome to my latest experiment. This is a big one, the one I've been waiting for all my life.
Well, it's a DeLorean, right?
Bear with me, Marty. All your questions will be answered. Roll tape.
Okay,
I will proceed.
Doc, is that a Devo?
Never mind that now. Never mind that now.
Screenwriter Bob Gale said he came up with the concept for the movie after finding his dad's old high school yearbook and musing about how odd it would be to go back in time and meet your old man when he was still a young man. Naturally, he then immediately jumped to whether or not his mum would want to date him. Just makes sense. Men. It's not actually included in Gale's script, but in subsequent interviews, he's finally explained how the teenage Marty McFly became friends with the town's resident elderly mad scientist. It seems one afternoon, a curious Marty stumbled across Doc's lab and, transfixed by all the elaborate equipment and technology he saw lying around, decided to break in and scope out the place. When he returned, instead of getting mad, Doc offered Marty a part-time job helping out with the experiments and taking care of his dog, Einstein. Einstein, by the way, was not originally a dog but a chimpanzee. However, Sid Sheinberg, then head of Universal, was dead set against using a chimp. He claimed to have researched it and discovered that no movie featuring a chimp had ever been a box office success. Sid, we shall not speak of Dunstan checks in. Not in this house.
My calculations are correct. When this baby hits 88 miles per hour, you're gonna see some serious
This scene, of course, features Doc Brown's iconic time machine, fashioned from a DMC DeLorean sports car. The vehicle's creator, John DeLorean, once sent a note to Bob Gale reading, "Thank you for keeping my dream alive." Oh, isn't that nice? And that's the power of love. Do you feel it? Please be playing this. Please have the rights to the music.
It's $1.50.
Yo, stop, put some cheese in that motherfucker, man.
Extra cheese is $2.
$2?
Yeah, $2.
Hey, you can forget that yeah.
Do the right thing. Spike Lee was only 29 when he directed his debut film, She's Gotta Have It, but he'd reached the ripe old age of 32 by the time he made perhaps his best remembered and most celebrated film, 1989's Do the Right Thing. What were you doing at 32? Yeah. The movie, about a racial conflict that boils over into violence in the Bedford-Stuyvesant neighbourhood of Brooklyn, was partly inspired by an episode of Alfred Hitchcock Presents that Lee first saw as a child. The episode, called Shopping for Death, centres on some insurance salesmen who discover that very hot weather can cause people to become violent, spiking the murder rate on blisteringly sunny days. Try living in Australia.
Boycott styles.
Go!
Right? Yo, boycott styles.
I got your boycott swing.
Boycott styles. Yo, man, what you laughing at? I paid for my slice, man. Yo, man, I spent much money in there.
Lee strove to reflect the intense heat in any visual way he could, as a constant reminder to the audience that, hey, it's really hot outside. He painted background walls red, made sure his actors were sweating profusely, and at some points, cinematographer Ernest Dickerson even held a butane lighter under the camera lens to produce a slight heatwave effect.
What are you trying to do?
What am I trying to do?
What are you trying to do?
Man, I want some brothers up on the wall, man.
I gotta work here, man. You my up,
And this is
man.
between me and Sal, man.
Me up.
I ain't trying to f you up, Mook. You know, I ain't trying to I'm sorry.
Though the film really was largely shot in and around the Bed-Stuy neighbourhood where it's set, Sal's Pizzeria here was built from scratch just for the film on a vacant lot at the corner of Stuyvesant and Lexington Avenues. The set was so detailed and authentic, they even had working pizza ovens. Yum. Adding to the heat. Among those photos of notable Italian Americans on the wall at Sal's, by the way, you'll find Robert De Niro's picture. Lee had originally considered him for the role of Sal, but came to feel that he was too big of a celebrity and his presence would distract audiences from the rest of the ensemble. Instead, he went with character actor Danny Aiello, who was nominated for Best Supporting Actor for the role.
This is my pizzeria. American Italians on the wall only.
Did you know that this was actually the movie that Barack and Michelle Obama went to go see on their very first date? Maybe could have picked something a little more romantic, Barry. Oh well, it looks like it worked out okay.
I get it, oh, very cute. Whatever we think of, if we think of J. Edgar Hoover will appear and destroy us, okay? So empty your heads. Empty your heads, don't think of anything. We've only got one shot at this.
Ghostbusters. A lot of folks who grew up in the 1980s can just about quote Ghostbusters front to back, but we're just going to focus on one of the film's most memorable additions to the pop culture canon, the attack of the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
It's the Stay Puft Marshmallow Man.
Design elements for the fictional brand mascot were borrowed from both the Pillsbury Doughboy and the Michelin Man. Called it when I was a kid. He looks like he's made of tires. But the primary influence was actually a character designed to promote a candy company around the turn of the 20th century, known as the Angelus Marshmallow Man. He did, in fact, have an entire body made of marshmallow, but was not, to the best of my knowledge, a representative of any ancient Sumerian or Babylonian gods, as far as we know. They work in mysterious ways.
Nobody steps on a church in my town. 1, 2, 3, go!
The Ghostbusters Marshmallow Man suit was designed from a soft, pliable, bendy foam, but it was kind of tough to work with and had a tendency to bunch up. The skull is fiberglass and had remote control mechanisms inside to move the face around. The person inside the suit is actually one of its designers, a guy named Bill Bryan. 18 total suits were built for the film at a cost of $20,000 to $35,000 each, but only one survived the actual shoot. All 17 others were burned to create the memorable final effects sequence, where the Busters blow up the massive fluffy villain with their proton packs. Toasty. The original sequence involved Stay Puft emerging from the river next to the Statue of Liberty, but adding the water made the effect too complicated and difficult to pull off, so they scrapped it and just had him materialize already in Manhattan.
I love this plan. I'm excited to be a part of it. Let's do it.
The job is definitely not worth $11,500 a year. Hurry!
But don't worry about Lady Liberty. She had her moment to shine in the climax of Ghostbusters 2. Remember? Because she's filled with pink slime. And then they play that Jackie Wilson song, which powers it up. Yeah, it's a weird movie. My Neighbor Totoro. By the late 80s, legendary Japanese director Hayao Miyazaki already had a few big hits under his belt, like Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind and Castle in the Sky. Nonetheless, he and producer Toshio Suzuki had a lot of trouble getting their follow-up, My Neighbor Totoro, off the ground. According to Miyazaki, they were repeatedly told that a quiet story about two young girls set in a realistic modern version of Japan wouldn't interest audiences who wanted, and I quote, guns, action, and speed. Miyazaki specifically described his own film as peaceful, tranquil, and innocent. That is what you call creative differences. Thankfully, Miyazaki ended up securing a release for the film by pairing it with another Studio Ghibli production, a bleak animated war film, Grave of the Fireflies. Just saying the title. Though they may have lacked vision, it turns out the executives were onto something. Totoro was not a box office hit when it first came out and was considered the biggest financial failure in Studio Ghibli's history to date. The film found an audience several years later after being rerun frequently on Japanese TV. It takes place in an area about an hour outside of Tokyo called Sayama Hills, where Miyazaki lived at the time. The area is now referred to as Totoro Forest, and even includes a full recreation of the home from the film, named the House of Kurosuke, in honor of those little soot sprite guys. For you English speakers out there, the name Totoro is an intentional mispronunciation of the Japanese word for troll, tororu. The idea is that Mei is telling her sister she saw a troll, but gets the word wrong and thus accidentally names him Totoro. We never find out the creature's actual name, although I guess we didn't ask, so that's kind of on us, you know? It's a bit rude.
Oh, wow! You guys, look! It's a beautiful waterfall!
The Goonies! Goonies comes from real 80s blockbuster royalty. Screenwriter Chris Columbus was coming fresh off of Gremlins. Director Richard Donner was just 2 years away from bringing Riggs and Murtaugh together for the first time in Lethal Weapon. And producer Steven Spielberg was... well, he was busy being Steven Spielberg. In fact, Spielberg, Columbus, and actor Corey Feldman had all collaborated together on Gremlins, and put a reference to that movie in this movie. When the police officer recalls to Chunk all of the various times that he's unnecessarily called the cops, he includes a report about little creatures that multiply when you pour water on them. Eh? See what they did there? Clever cross-promotion. Like they need more money.
Wow! It's a giant piggy bank! Guys, we found it! We found
Oh, silver, it's shining all over the place.
Cool, guys, we did it! Hold this anchor for me!
Though he just gets a story by and executive producer credit on the finished film, Spielberg shot a number of Goonies scenes as well, including the one where the kids bang on the underground pipes, and this scene, set at the bottom of the town wishing well.
Wait a minute, this isn't gold. This is a wishing well.
There's also this one where Nedry disables the security fences and the T-Rex attacks the kids and... okay, no, that's a different movie. Exterior scenes, mostly at the front of the Goonies, were really shot on location in Astoria, Oregon. But all the underground stuff in the caves and tunnels was filmed on sound stages in beautiful, scenic Burbank, California. Astoria, nonetheless, hosts Goonies Day every single year on June 7 in commemoration of the film and its success. That was the day the movie first opened in theaters back in 1985.
These are somebody else's wishes. They're somebody else's dreams.
Yeah, but you know what? This one right here. This was my dream, my wish. And it didn't come true. So I'm taking it back. I'm taking them all back.
One key scene that was cut from the film featured the Goonies' oath, which goes as follows. I will never betray my goon deck friends. We'll stick together until the whole world ends. Through heaven and hell and nuclear war, good pals like us will stick like tar. In the city, or the country, or the forest, or the boonies, I proudly declared a fellow Goonie. Yeah, wow, I can't imagine why they cut that out. It just rolls off the tongue.
What's in there?
Yes. Where's your lunch?
You're wearing it.
You're nauseating.
The Breakfast Club. After writing Mr. Mom and Vacation, screenwriter John Hughes intended for The Breakfast Club, the story of a group of very different high school students who get thrown together during weekend detention, to become his directorial debut.
Well, Brian, this is a very nutritious lunch. All the food groups are represented. Did your mom marry Mr. Rogers?
No, Mr. Johnson.
The studio, however, preferred his concept for 16 Candles, so that one got released first. Hughes juggled his cast members around a few times before settling on this final lineup. Emilio Estevez was originally cast as Bender, the bully, but when Hughes couldn't find anyone ideally suited to play Andrew, the jock, he had Estevez switch over and cast Judd Nelson as new Bender. John Cusack and Nicolas Cage were both also considered for Bender, which would probably have changed the movie a lot. As well, Molly Ringwald was initially cast as Allison, aka the Basket Case, but wanted to play Claire instead, who was still called Kathy in the script at this point, but that is not important right now. Ultimately, Ringwald won the day, and Ali Sheedy got the Allison part. Also in the running for Claire were Robin Wright, Jodie Foster, and Laura Dern.
Isn't our son swell? yes, dear. Isn't life swell?
Of the main cast, only Ringwald and Anthony Michael Hall were around the high school age when making the movie. Judd Nelson was the oldest cast member, at a non-high school friendly 26. And he looked it too. That kid looked like he'd been out of high school for quite some time and then failed community college 6 times. Several of these same actors, including Nelson, Ali Sheedy and Emilio Estevez, believably played college students that same year in 1985 in St. Elmo's Fire. Hey, brats are gonna pack, am I right? The Never-Ending Story. This dark fantasy classic was German director Wolfgang Petersen's follow-up to the critically acclaimed submarine drama Das Boot. He'd later come to Hollywood and direct films including In the Line of Fire, Outbreak, Air Force One, and The Perfect Storm, which I cried so hard watching.
All the land is gone.
I know. And all because I failed.
You tried.
But none of them feature a flying dog who calls himself a dragon because there's no one brave enough around to correct him. Ah, Falcor the Luck Dragon. Oh, my boy. So let's talk about The Never-Ending Story. At the time, this was the most expensive film in German cinema history, with a price tag of about $27 million. Michael Ende, who wrote the book on which the film was based, was not a fan, calling it revolting, and insisting that the filmmakers didn't understand what he'd written. Alright, fair enough, but what did he think of the costumes? The film actually only adapts the first half of Ende's novel, and although the sequel takes some elements from the second half of the book, it also pivots off in some new directions. Plus, the little-seen third film in the series also had a completely original story. So there's never actually been a direct adaptation of the original novel's storyline, front to back. So technically a reimagining of this could happen and could exist, and if you write screenplays, now's your chance.
Let the Oran guide you. If the ivory tower still stands, take us there.
Two of the pivotal scenes of the book never made it to the film at all. In the book, Atreyu meets Falcor when he's fighting a shape-shifting monster known as Ugramul the Many. Gotta figure that's a tough effect to pull off. In another scene, Falcor and Atreyu get caught up in a fight between wind giants. These scenes with Atreyu being swept away by the Nothing were as close as we got to realising this moment. Steven Spielberg helped Petersen recut the movie for US audiences, tightening up the pacing and ultimately removing about 7 minutes. As a thank you, Petersen gave Spielberg the original Oran prop that Atreyu is holding here as a keepsake. He's probably got it stashed in a drawer somewhere along with Elliot's red hoodie and Captain Hook's hook. Me, my, now.
Celia is coming with us.
Say what?
Celia is coming to Memphis with us.
Over my dead body.
You satisfied? That's what you want?
The Color Purple. Spielberg was not an immediately obvious choice to adapt a big screen adaptation of the Alice Walker novel, The Color Purple, but producer Quincy Jones was insistent that he was the one with the kind of singular vision to bring this story to the screen.
You took my sister Nettie away from me. You knew she was the only somebody in the world who loved me.
Jones and his team of musicians also handled the soundtrack for the film, making it one of only 3 Spielberg films, along with Ready Player One and Bridge of Spies, that's not scored by the great John Williams. This was Spielberg's 8th film, and his first project without a fantasy or science fiction element since the 1970s, and the string of early 80s blockbusters that made him a household name.
Of course, your daddy ain't nothing but some dead horse. Shut up! Ain't do it bad like for a woman life of the man.
He'd follow this up with even more straight-ahead dramas, 1987's Empire the Sun and 1989's Always, before once more returning to genre films with Last Crusade, Hook, and Jurassic Park. And he's hopped back and forth ever since.
My God, the dead has arisen.
I done had enough bad luck. Keep me laughing the rest of my life. Sat in that jail down there about done rot to death. I know what it like, Miss Seeley. Wanna go somewhere and can't.
Despite receiving mixed reviews from critics, it was a considerable box office success and launched the big-time acting careers of both Whoopi Goldberg and Oprah Winfrey. Amazingly, it was the debut feature for both ladies. Color Purple was nominated for 11 Oscars, including Best Picture, Best Actress for Goldberg, and Best Supporting Actress for Winfrey, but didn't win a single award on the big night. Despite all of those honours, Spielberg himself did not receive a nomination for Best Director, an award he wouldn't take home until 1994's Schindler's List. This was also the very first PG-13 rated film ever nominated for the Best Picture award. See, you learned something today.
Oh my God!
What?
What?
Take it easy.
This time I was trying to do everything right.
Don't just become excited.
I thought if I stayed away from the city hall, I wouldn't have the bad luck I had again.
You're making me feel guilty.
I'm marrying your brother.
Moonstruck. In the mid-80s, Cher was in the midst of a real acting hot streak. She'd been Oscar-nominated in 1984 for Silkwood and critically acclaimed for her role in 1985's The Mask.
I should have taken a rock and killed myself years ago. I'm gonna marry him. Do you hear me? Last night never happened, and I'm gonna marry him, and you and I are gonna take this to our coffins.
Then she appeared in 3 memorable films, all released in 1987, Suspect, The Witches of Eastwick, and the extremely New York rom-com Moonstruck.
I'm in love with you.
Snap out of it.
I can't.
All right, well then I must never see you again, and the bad blood will just have to stay there between you and Johnny forever. And you won't come to the wedding.
I'll come to the wedding.
I am telling you, you can't come.
Though this duo of Cher and Nicolas Cage is probably the best remembered pairing from the film, it was Cher and Olympia Dukakis who took home Oscars for their performances that year. Cage wasn't even nominated. Writer John Patrick Shanley also won for his original screenplay. He says the film's uniquely stylized dialogue, which was criticized a bit at the time for being unrealistic, was in fact based on 2 women he overheard speaking loudly on the New York subway. Shanley originally titled the film Bride and the Wolf, but director Norman Jewison wouldn't have it and convinced him to go with Moonstruck instead. He made the case to Shanley that the characters frequently discussed the moon in the script, and he used the full moon as a visual motif throughout the film. Artsy. A restless Cage didn't want to work on the project, preferring more edgy movies, what he called punk films at this stage in his career. He said at the time that it wasn't the sort of movie he'd be interested in seeing, and his agent had to essentially force him to make Moonstruck.
Now, if I can have the 2 things that I love together for one night, I would be satisfied to give up, oh Christ, to give up the rest of my life.
All right, all right.
All right.
All right.
Meet me at the mat.
All right, all right. Where's the mat?
After the movie's huge success, Cage naturally picked the bizarre Vampire's Kiss as his follow-up. Yes, that's the one where he eats a real cockroach on screen. Why do you ask?
You know, I'm so glad I never got involved with you. I just would have ended up being some woman you had to get up out of bed and leave at 3 o'clock in the morning and go clean your andirons. And you don't even have a fireplace. Not that I would know this.
When Harry Met Sally. Director Rob Reiner got divorced from Penny Marshall in 1981 and spoke frequently with his friend Nora Ephron about it. Their series of conversations, which moved beyond specifics to just deep thoughts about love, sex, and relationships, formed the basis of Ephron's screenplay for When Harry Met Sally, and some snippets of their own comments and observations even wound up in the finished movie.
Why are you getting so upset? This is not about you.
Yes, it is. You are a human affront to all women, and I am a woman.
Hey, I don't feel great about this, but I don't hear anyone complaining.
Of course not. You're out the door too fast.
Though he and Ephron were never romantically linked, Reiner did fall in love while making this movie. The film's cinematographer, Barry Sonnenfeld, introduced him to photographer Michelle Singer during production, and they got married in 1989, the same year the film came out. This famous scene is set at New York's Katz Deli, which has fully embraced its cinematic legacy after the movie became wildly popular. They even put a sign over the table where the scene was shot, so you can't miss it. That's actually Reiner's real-life mother, Estelle, who says the famous line, "I'll have what she's having."
I'll have what she's having.
Which the AFI has ranked as the all-time number 33 most memorable movie quote. The line wasn't in Ephron's script. Billy Crystal suggested it on the day. Meg Ryan's demonstration of faking it for the entire lunchtime crowd was also spontaneous. The entire scene was just going to be an improvised conversation on the subject.
I think they have an okay time.
How do you know?
I mean, how do I know? I know.
Because they...
Yes, because they...
How do you know that they're really
What are you saying? That they fake orgasm?
Reiner and Crystal had first worked together on All in the Family and remained friends over the years. Some of the interplay between Crystal and Bruno Kirby in the film is based on Reiner and Crystal's real-life relationship. Carrie Fisher's character was modelled on, you guessed it, Penny Marshall. In the original script, Harry and Sally didn't end up together, which Efron felt was more realistic, but it would make me more sad, so there's that.
Clarence Bodiger, you are under arrest. You have the right to remain silent. You.
RoboCop. Screenwriter Ed Neumeyer developed the idea for RoboCop while he was bored at work as a story editor for Universal Pictures. Oh, we have all been there. He ended up collaborating with a film student named Michael Miner, who had a similar idea to his own for a story about a robot police officer. Miner had been calling his story Super Cop, which I kind of wish they'd kept it as a title because he's a cop, but super. While working at Universal, Neumeyer visited the set of Blade Runner, which he said motivated him to write RoboCop. He also took a lot of inspiration from the British comic book series Judge Dredd, which has a similarly satirical tone and is also set in a ruined urban landscape.
Anything you say may be used against you. It's Dick Jones! You I work for Dick Jones! Dick Jones! He's the #2 guy at OCP! OCP runs the cops!
Actor Peter Weller could barely move around in that RoboCop suit, which took nearly 11 hours to put on completely. During pre-production, he had trained in subtle movements and even studied mime in order to play a robot convincingly. But all of the nuance of his performance was lost within the clunky metallic exterior. The industrial shooting locations, plus the suit, made it excruciatingly hot for Weller at times. He had to constantly rehydrate, and at some points, cool air hoses were pumped into the suit to give him some relief.
Book him.
What's the charge?
He's a cop killer.
It was very hard to hear in the suit as well, so often, Weller would just listen to music while shooting scenes instead to set the mood. During one big shootout, he was listening to Peter Gabriel's Red Rain.
Get out of there! Get out!
Which brings us to our David Lynch dreamlike psychological thriller, Blue Velvet, in which a naive college student, played by Kyle MacLachlan, falls for a mysterious lounge singer, and through her discovers a dark, violent underworld beyond his most twisted nightmares. Put the kids to bed before you pull this one up, maybe. Lynch made Blue Velvet right after arguably the biggest disappointment of his career, the sci-fi adaptation Dune. Hey, I loved it.
What are you doing in my apartment, Jeffrey Beaumont?
I wanted to see you.
Are you kidding? Who sent you here?
Nobody.
I've seen you before.
I sprayed your apartment. I took your key. I didn't mean to do anything except see you.
In order to get the film made and maintain personal control over the project, he agreed to slash the budget, including his own salary. The film was going to cost $10 million to make, but Lynch brought it in for a lean $6 million, and that includes his coffee budget. Among his numerous demands, producer Dino De Laurentiis insisted that Blue Velvet be no more than 2 hours long. It clocks in at exactly 120 minutes. Lynch paid so much attention to the runtime. At nearly the exact midpoint, 60 minutes in, MacLachlan's character says the line, "I'm in the middle of a mystery." Clever. Lynch had originally envisioned Helen Mirren as singer Dorothy Valens in the film, and though she was interested and even contributed ideas that made it into the final film, ultimately she passed on the role. Debbie Harry had also been considered, but having already made Videodrome with David Cronenberg, she was concerned that she'd be typecast as the weirdo. It went to Isabella Rossellini after she and Lynch were introduced by mutual friends at a restaurant in New York.
I want to see you get undressed!
Lynch later recalled that, upon meeting her, he told Rossellini she looked so much like Ingrid Bergman that she could probably be her daughter. That's because she is Ingrid Bergman's daughter.
Hey, Frank. You a piece of
Tony, what are you talking about?
You know what I'm talking about, you cockroach.
Scarface. In America, first you get her the show, then you'll watch her the movies, and then you'll explain her the trivia. That's right, we are watching Brian De Palma's cocaine-fueled 1983 crime odyssey, Scarface, in which Al Pacino stars as wildly ambitious and just all-around wild Miami drug kingpin Tony Montana. Hoo-wah! Despite the fact that it's maybe the most famous Miami movie of all time, the film was actually shot in Los Angeles, New York, and Santa Barbara. The Cuban-American community in South Florida was not very friendly to the production, and there were concerns about picketing and protests.
I gave you your start. I was the one who believed in you. I stayed loyal to you. I made what I could on the side, but I never turned you, Frank.
The film was repeatedly hit with an X rating by the MPAA for excessive swearing and graphic violence. De Palma edited the movie down to get the R rating after multiple appeals. Nonetheless, it still ranks among the most violent Hollywood films of the era, with 42 on-screen deaths, though that does include overdoses.
Punk. Son of a... So long, Mal. Have a good breath. F*** you!
The cocaine they're using on screen, by the way, is baby laxatives. So it's a good thing that none of the actors were babies. The nickname Scarface is never used in the film, at least in English. At one point, a Colombian gangster refers to Tony as Cara Cicatriz, its Spanish translation. Still, got it in there and that's what counts. Rappers and college students famously love Scarface, but did you know it was also a favourite of former Iraqi dictator and all-around terrible human being Saddam Hussein?
Okay, then you call me tomorrow.
Hey, man, you got a job, huh?
Hey, Tony. Thanks.
He named one of his money laundering front companies Montana Management in the movie's honour. Hooah! That is a lot of 80s movies to blaze through so quickly. You might need to shake off some of the glitter out of your hair. I don't know, take a chill pill. Chillax. One of those. Be sure to check back with Rotten Tomatoes and RT Essentials for a lot more trips down movie memory lane. Maybe even the 90s. Or the noughties, as we call it, because zeros are noughts. Sounds more naughty than it actually is.